I'm here with Lenny Bruce of Dust Bowl to talk about the upcoming latest offering, Sound and Fury, out February 23rd on AFM Records. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me about this record. How's things going with you?
I'm doing good, coming close to the release of the new albums, really exciting, ready to tour. Full times, yeah.
So let's talk about this new record because I feel like there's a lot to unpack from this new album from Dust Bowl. Let me start off by asking you, what inspired you guys to go in this direction sound-wise?
Well, it's never like the creative process is never something that you sit down and you say like, let's do this and we want to sound this in the end. It's always, for us at least, it's always like freeing yourself and see what happens. It's more about the process. It's more about let's see where we're going, let's see where we end up. So being really open-minded to any ideas that seem to be, that seem to make sense, that seem to feel right. That was our goal for Sound and Fury. So of course we wanted to add some new flavors, add some new ideas, add some stuff that we didn't do before. We wanted to challenge ourselves as musicians and also as like people working on the record in the studio. So it was a big process of trying out, being open, being creative, and being true to yourself. And Sound and Fury is what came out of it, and it's really, I think it's a really interesting album. We're really, really proud of it.
Not putting boundaries on yourselves, not saying that, okay, this is what we've done in the past, so this
Exactly.
must be what we continue to do in the future. Releasing of yourselves of those chains. Did that feel empowering to a certain degree, in be able to create whatever it is that you wanted to create?
Absolutely, it does. It does, and it was necessary. We had to do this because I could, of course, do another like a typical old school thrash metal album the way people expect them to be. But if I go on stage, then I need to be an actor. I'm not a good actor. I'm a good musician, so I play music from the heart. But I don't want to sell something to the people that I don't feel. Which doesn't mean that I don't feel thrash metal. That's not true. I love thrash metal, still do, and forever will. But we kind of like made 3 or 4 thrash metal albums. And now it's like, okay, let's see what else we can do because we're still young kids. We're still the same guys that we were like back then. But we were just in the past, we were driven by aggression and driven by let's put 50 riffs into one song. We want to show the world what we can play on our instruments. And now it's like the focus is just somewhere else. It's more like, what if we take the same energy, the same guys, the same people, but take just one riff for a song? How does that sound? Eyewitness, for example. What comes out of that? Maybe it's something interesting. What if we do something like Sound and Fury, the title track, and mix some stuff that has been somewhere in our minds for a long time and make a cool song out of it that speaks from our hearts. It's for us, it needs to be real what we do because we see ourselves as a rock and roll band. So we don't want to sell something to the people that's not true for us. And mixing the new songs with the old catalog, with the old thrash metal songs, works great. We did it live, we do it in a rehearsal room, and a mixture of both. It mixes things up. It makes things more interesting. So it made so much sense to us. So it just felt naturally.
When I was listening to the record, I hate comparing albums and I hate comparing bands. But having said that, when I was listening to the record, considering how young you guys are, considering what the previous records sounded like, in the direction where this album is going, you kind of reminded me a little bit of Lost Society because I feel like there is some parallels between the two bands, young bands that started off very thrashy, and then at a certain point in time in their discography, there was a need to evolve. There was a need to, free yourselves up of that umbrella and moving forward. Do you guys ever stop to think in terms of, okay, there's all of this that we can gain from it that you already outlined, but did you ever thought about what it could be that we can lose from it?
Yeah, I feel that I think the way we and also Lost Society feel the things, they all also started as so young. And
Hmm.
when you're really young, you need some kind of blueprint, you need some kind of framework where you can rely on. And for us and for Lost Society, it was thrash metal, It was like, oh, okay, this is like the blueprint where we can add like our stuff. But as you grow up, you feel like, all right, cool. This thrash metal like movement was something that was happening in the 80s, like 40 years ago. We were born mid 90s, so I just know it from history books, like kind of like, and from the music. So for us, and I think also for Lost Society, it felt just like maybe it's time that we don't copy something that was already been done, but take that and now try to do our own thing out of it and see if we can start a new movement, which in another 40 years, people will look back and say, wow, what did those guys do? Um, so I think that was the motivation as well for us, also for Lost Society to evolve like that. And of course, that you might lose some fans, you might lose some people, you might lose the comfort. It was comfortable to be in a thrash metal band because I was like, I know how the cover artwork should look like. I know how it should sound like. I know that I gotta play this guitar because, it's already been done. So if you free yourself, you can also fall very free. And that's I think that danger is really exciting, but also pushing you, keeping pushing you, yeah.
How's the feedback been so far? You guys have released a bunch of songs. Has the feedback been positive?
Yeah, there's a lot of been positive feedback. Of course, there's also been some people who were like, "Really, what the fuck? What happened to you guys? Like, did you take too much drugs in the lockdown, or what happened?" And I understand it. From their point, I can understand it, but I always loved bands that did something unexpected to me. Um, Even though in the first moment you hate them for that, in the first moment they're like, really? Come on, I expected something else. But after a while, you remember like I like this band, and they do not something to hurt me, so maybe I should give it another listen and another listen, another listen. Suddenly it clicks, and you're like, oh, I got it. And maybe you're inspired to new music, and it has been to me a lot of times like that. So um I think it's if people are like shocked by it, it's just a matter of time until they see the bigger picture. But there is so much positive feedback also, and people writing us and people like, yeah, telling us like, we hope that you guys do that because you have the potential to do it, and we were waiting for this a long time. So um yeah, it feels exciting right now, and good looking to the future.
As a listener, I was one of those that when I pressed play, I had a certain expectation coming in. This
Yeah,
album kind of reminded me a little bit of how I felt when I heard Anthrax release A Sound of White Noise, because it was
yeah,
very different from Persistence of Time. And I was like, what the hell did Anthrax just do here? Like, this is garbage. And now it's one of my favorite albums from
yeah,
Anthrax. So
yeah,
listening,
crazy.
yeah, so listen to this record. The first time that I went through it, I was like, what's happening? What are they doing? Like, what's going
Mm,
on here? And then the more I played it, the more I was like, okay, forget about what my expectations were.
mm.
Let me just enjoy it for what it is without
Exactly,
comparing it. Just is it good or is it bad on its own? Never mind
exactly,
comparing it to what it could have been. The more I did that, the more the album played better to me. The more the album sounded better to me. Um,
exactly.
but
And
I think, sorry, go
that's
ahead.
how you gotta see it. Absolutely, that's how you gotta see, and that's how I see an album as a musician, as a composer. Because an album for me is it's 12 songs, it's 12 stories that came out in a certain time frame. That's it. I can't control how I'm gonna feel in 2 years. So I don't know what I'm gonna write in 2 years because I don't want to be the person being like, yeah, I know in 2 years I'm gonna do this and that. I love to not knowing what I'm gonna do. So it was the same thing for Sound and Fury. We just were like, how do we feel at the moment? This is a weird time in the pandemic. Everything changed. We weren't on tour. I suddenly started to get into the studio and producing music. There was so much new stuff to explore. So it was just like, this is our current songs. This is what we write at the moment. And it doesn't mean everything we did before is, it's it's still there, you know. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean that was
100%. You
it
can
or
still go and
something. It
listen
does.
to it. You can still go
Yeah,
and listen to it. Now,
exactly.
I gotta say, I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but I thought the way you guys built the track listing was super smart because the album starts off with "Leave Nothing Behind," and that's a track that I felt like of all the tracks on this album is the one that connects with the previous records the best. It's the one that
Exactly.
has more of the dust bolt of the past, so it's a nice way to get into the record because the first two songs kind of feel like they could have been on the previous record, but they're on this
Exactly.
record. And then at
Yeah.
the tail end of the album, you hit us with "You Make Me Feel Nothing" and "Little Stone," which is two songs that are so different, so unique. But even on this record, they're so different and unique from everything else. Did this design of starting off kind of connecting with the past and then really jolting the listener at the end of the record, was this by design? Did you guys think all of this through?
Kind of, who knows? Who knows? I like honestly, I can tell you like making a track list for an album and choosing the singles for an album is the most horrible things you gotta do as a band after you've finished in the studio. You know, you're just happy that you survived the studio time and you recorded all the songs and you're like, okay, I'm done. And then it's like, nope, you gotta do the track list. And this is like really horrible because you got so many options, you know, and you got so many options to do it wrong and maybe to do it right. Who knows? But I think it's kind of like that. Yeah, I think it's kind of like that. So I felt really good with starting with "Leave Nothing Behind" and "Eyewitness" for sure. And I knew like "You Make Me Feel Nothing" is something really like interesting and special, and it has to be somewhere in the second half of the album. And you know, because if you made it until then, you're
You're
open for
hooked.
everything. You know, if you made it until then, if you're still on there, then
I agree with you.
somehow like that. And honestly, it's really it's a weird decision. I don't know. It's a weird decision. I sometimes create the track list before the tracks even exist, and then I you know I change it up multiple times, and I go back to the original version. It just is a weird process, and I can tell you there's so many things that go into it. But if you say it makes sense to you, that's really I
Yeah,
appreciate
because
that. It's
you
really
hit the
cool.
nail on the head. Like the opening, like I said
Yeah.
earlier, the opening tracks connect with the past. These songs, because they're so different, if you had
Mm,
put them earlier on the record, you may have lost some listeners all the way through because they would get to those songs and they're like, "Ah, man, I don't know if I can, if I'm gonna go through with it." But like you said,
exactly.
if you make it to song 9 and you're still committed and you're still enjoying the record, then you're able to digest that difference a lot better.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now, I want to ask you about the guitar tone on this record because that was one of the things that I really enjoyed. I love what you guys did with the sound of the guitars. They
Wow,
had a
thank
very
you.
full sound feeling to it, very melodic as well. They still had some chunkiness, they still had some groove there, but they had such a great tone. The tone of the guitars was so cool. Did you guys change anything on the guitars in order to achieve that tone?
Oh yeah, we kind of yeah, we did. We did. I mean, you know, for me it was I after like having this time off from touring with Dust Bolt, I kind of like found out that you know, I've always been this weird guy who was feeling more like a blues guitar player than a metal guitar player. I was always more interested in playing like really impulsive and playing like from your heart and like you know even playing wrong notes and fucking up tones. And I've always loved those guitar players more than the guys who can sweep like crazy on the fretboard, which is like I'm like, wow, you know, I don't know, like crazy to do that. um but I always went with the, you know, like kind of like go for it guitar players like and Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and even
Mhm.
Jack White and Prince, Gary Moore, stuff like that. So I recognized in the pandemic that I should just, you know, I just include that more into Dust Bowl and not like try to be something that I'm not. So I grabbed my Telecaster, my Fender Telecaster, which is not supposed to be played metal on, you know. It doesn't have any active pickups or something. It's just a cheap $200 Telecaster I got from a friend, but I love it in my hands, you know. So I took that and put it into my PV amplifier, and I took that and put it into a Marshall amp. So we did anything that was typical for a rock and roll band, but that wasn't particular typical for a modern metal band, you know? Because the only thing I knew was we don't want to sound like anybody else. We will wanna we If this is the first album that I'm gonna produce myself, it should sound different. It should sound special. And that's why we choose Moritz Enders, the guy who mixed and mastered the album. He did it all on analog. He has like a big console, like back in the days, you know, analog SSL console and analog stuff and knobs and, you know, mistakes and everything. So that was really a cool thing to lean into in the pandemic days.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because listening to this record, I was recording my review and I was putting my thoughts together, and I was like, okay, this doesn't sound like a hard rock album. It doesn't necessarily sound like your prototypical metal album. It sounds like a heavy rock album. It feels
Yeah,
to me like there's a lot of rock and roll, even some grunge influences
exactly.
in the sound coming through.
Absolutely. You nailed it. I
And
mean,
it works really well.
you know, as I said in the beginning, this all doesn't happen like really on purpose. It happens, you know, step by step on purpose. You got this idea, and it's like, wow, I always liked grunge music. And for me, it was never, you know, there's people who say like, we hate grunge because it destroyed metal in the 90s. It was like, I didn't experience that, you know.
Me
I,
too.
I
Me too.
grew up I grew up in 2000, and for me it was like I could listen to Nirvana, and next track would be Slayer song, and it works for me, you know. But and I just felt like there's no need for this separation actually. So if I have some grunge ideas, you know, some grunge vocal lines, why should I not add them to a Dust Bowl song? Why not? Please tell me. There's no reason. We're a rock and roll band. We can do anything we want. So we just went for it.
How was it vocally for you, this record?
Oh, it was a huge step for me as a singer to, you know, for me it was always like the metal Lenny, the metal guy who was like kind of like screaming at Dust Bowl, and it was this other guy, Lenny, who made some other music and played acoustic gigs here and there, and the other guy who would love to be a singer, but he didn't have the balls to do it, and that changed. So I was like, you know, the time has come. I do what I want, and I kind of like try to combine the aggressive vocals and aggressive screaming, make it even more aggressive, more extremer than and combine it with the melodic side. And switching between that is something really interesting. And so I got a lot of stuff to do when we play live. I got to switch between two vocal guys in one person and play guitar at the same time. That's a really cool challenge to do.
I know you're going to have your hands full. Well, Lenny, thank you very much for your time today. This was a blast to talk to you about the record. To me, it was an album that surprised me, that shocked me, but I've fallen in love with it because I really like what you guys did on this record. It was very refreshing. And man, there's some catchy, hooky tracks on this album that's just unreal.
Wow, thank you very much. Appreciate that. It's great to hear that you like it. It really means a lot.
Yeah. It's. I love the design. I enjoy the sound. It was very refreshing. I like that mixture of like heaviness with more grungy, with more rock, with
Yeah.
like all of these different influences. It felt like an album that had a lot of life in it. So I really enjoyed listening to it. And
Wow.
congratulations on all the work that you guys put into it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Take care,
much.
man. All the best.
Take care. Hopefully see you soon.